Well, time for a little sermon here. And I thought, well, what is it that what is it we want to talk about here today? And I thought I would give 2 tips about how to strengthen our spiritual foundations. And so the first tip I'm calling look beyond the hood ornament. How many of you know what a hood ornament is?
Yes.
Yes, yes, it's the
Yeah.
decoration on the hood of a car. A Mack truck has a brass-colored husky. A Mercedes-Benz hood ornament looks like a peace sign. And the Jaguar, we don't have a lot of those in our neighborhood, hosts a silver cat, a silver Jaguar lunging forward. Well, I remember driver's education. I was 15 and a half years old. The teacher and our classmate, Cynthia, who was very, very nearsighted, were in the front seat. And 3 of us teenagers were in the back seat, just terrified because our classmate, Cynthia, was driving about 5 miles an hour, but she was like swerving back and forth on the road. She wasn't looking down the road. She couldn't see that far. She was looking at the front of the car. And our teacher just lost it. And he yelled, "Cynthia, look beyond the hood ornament." So the first tip about strengthening our spiritual foundation in these times is that we have to look at a reality that is beyond our nearsighted vision. The reports of the pandemic can keep us immersed in fear and despair. You know, our being stuck at home can keep us immersed in like what is happening and being upset. But we're here today to remember together a larger reality. We just sang a hymn in which God was speaking to us and saying, "Fear not, I'm with thee. Don't be dismayed. I'm your God. I will give you aid. I'll strengthen thee, help thee, and cause thee to stand, upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand." So here's a question in the pandemic. Do you trust God's promise? Because we are being tested on that question right now. Now, of course, we're uneasy, we're even afraid in certain circumstances. That's totally human nature. But deep down in the foundation of our hearts, do we trust that we are in God's hands? And if we don't trust quite yet, are we willing to want to trust? This international crisis is offering us an opportunity to dig really deep into ourselves. And as the hymn says that Jaden and Stan sang, trust in the Lord and wade in. It's pretty easy to do in simple times when our, IRAs are sparkling and our health is glowing. But right now, we're asked to do harder work of trusting in tough times, of even trusting when we're on the brink of death. We're being asked to trust that we are being held in the mighty, omnipotent hands, the gentle hands of God. So let's go back to Babylon 2,500 years ago. The Hebrew people captured, they were 1,600 miles away from home. They had lived in exile 70 years. They were cut off from their culture. They were cut off from their religious center, the temple, and they felt cut off from their God. But Ezekiel had been given a vision to share with them of this battlefield empty of everything but dry bones bleaching in the sun. And the vision said, prophesy to the bones and prophesy to the breath and say to the breath, enter and give new life. And that's what happened. It's a pretty wild vision. But Ezekiel was basically saying, folks, the world as you used to know it is gone. But so what? God is still here and now, even in exile, even in this foreign place. God's breath is at work in you and with you, and nothing is impossible. So that first tip is about developing your spiritual vision. Right now, it is tempting to develop our television. And television is great. It awakens our awareness and it helps us connect with, which is a really good thing. But television also awakens what I call our terror vision, which doesn't serve us. Jesus would say it's a house built on sand. Our spiritual vision, looking beyond the hood ornament, however, awakens our awareness and awakens in us a deep, deep sense of trust and comfort and peace, even in terrible times. Jesus would say, that is when your house is built on a rock. And now for our second tip for building our spiritual foundations. I call this one, stay in the moment. I saw a wonderful YouTube video the other day by the spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle. He recorded it last week, and it was regarding digging deeper into our spiritual foundation during the pandemic. I'm going to quote some things from him. It was so powerful. He said, if you don't get ill from the virus, fear can still consume you. And here's what he says about fear. Fear is a thought form in which you project yourself into a future moment. If you are totally present in the now, in this minute, you realize that there is nothing to fear. But when we leave the moment, fear arises. And then he says, adversity forces us to go deeper, to awaken to a deeper dimension of who we are. He says, life becomes unbearable when we live just on the surface, just watching newscasts, being in a state of anxiety and fear and suffering, even if nothing has actually happened yet. That is a house built on sand. And he says, you are this house. Use this time as an opportunity to come to the realization that you are much deeper than what is going on in the world. Find that place. This is a time for awakening the consciousness of humanity. This is a time of tremendous opportunity. Use it. Don't waste it. That was Eckhart Tolle. Staying in the moment strengthens our spiritual foundation. But what does that mean? Can we give another example? I would like to give the example of Yo-Yo Ma, who is one of the most famous cello players of all times. And I listened to him in an interview with David Rubenstein, and he talks about being totally in the present moment. Here's what he says. Yo-Yo Ma, the cellist, being a musician is not about external recognition, even though that's great. It is about internal development. I spend my life making the sounds that I want to hear, that I want to express emotionally, mentally, musically. And when I play with absolute concentration. Rubinstein asked him, do you get distracted? And he said, no, I play with absolute concentration. I don't mind what or where I play, with whom I play, or for whom I play. But I care about how I play. Doesn't matter if I'm playing for kindergartners or the White House, he said. The most important thing I can do is to be totally present and totally engaged. Then he said this, which I thought is just so profoundly beautiful. Live music is a communion. I am attuned to the energy in the audience. You don't have to be there, and I don't have to be there. But if we're going to be together, let's make it count, he says. If I forget tomorrow what we did together today, then what was the purpose of doing it? That is what being in communion in the moment is about for me. Yo-Yo Ma. So this second tip for strengthening our spiritual foundation is to be really present with what you're doing now. Wiping down countertops, washing your hands, Skyping, being present with the one or more people in your home, or with your own inner selves. Futurizing is terrorizing at this stage. Now, we aren't Yo-Yo Ma, but we can be aware of what is happening internally. We can be aware of the energy that is generated within us and among us with the folks that we're with, even on Skype. When we are in that now, fear evaporates, and the living presence of spirit subsumes us, and we are in heaven at that moment, even in the middle of a pandemic. So in closing, here's a question for you. How many times do you think that you have said the Lord's Prayer? I was kind of adding up, all the worship services and funerals that I have been to since I was a very little girl. And I figured I've said it out loud in public at least 4,000 times. But there is one line in the Lord's Prayer that sums up these two tips for strengthening our spiritual foundation. And here is that line. You give us this day, our daily bread. This one line from Jesus's teaching is so powerful if we can really believe it and enter it, because it talks about the larger picture beyond the hood ornament, that it's God who gives us our daily bread. That is everything we need to live on this earth and to live beyond it. And secondly, it expresses the idea of the present moment, that God gives us this day, right now, all that is needed. And so my dearly beloved church in exile all over the world, that is the good news of the gospel on this fifth Sunday in Lent.